The Kenny Pickett era has begun for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He got his first appearance, albeit in a loss, but he led 2 touchdown drives and scored 2 touchdowns himself. I'm going to get Ray Fittipaldo's opinions. I'm Chris Carter here, host of the North Shore Drive podcast with the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Ray gave his grades. I want to get Ray's opinions, not just on his play on the field, but how the teammates responded to him in the Steelers locker room after the game. We'll also talk about what's going on with the defense and look around at the AFC North, as no one's really broken away yet with that division. All that and more right here in the North Shore Drive podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Let's get into it.
You are now listening to the North Shore Drive podcast, a show on all things Pittsburgh sports from the writers of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, hosted by Christopher Carter.
And welcome to the North Shore Drive podcast. I'm Chris Carter. He's Ray Fittipaldo. And remember, you can get this show. We are on Monday, Wednesday, Friday on anywhere, but especially on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and YouTube. If you're watching this video on YouTube, hit the like button if you're enjoying the video. Subscribe to our YouTube channel to get all of our episodes. We also have plenty of other shows that come out on this Post-Gazette channel, so do stay tuned for all of those. We're also brought to you by the Acrisure Fan Advantage and the power to project one of our Post-Gazette Steelers beat writers into your home or office. Using augmented reality, you can get an exclusive pregame breakdown from a Steelers expert standing right in your living room. Get the latest insights on starting lineups, key matchups, and critical stats at post-gazette.com/Acrisure Fan Advantage. No apps or downloads, just insider access to Steelers updates at post-gazette.com/Acrisure Fan Advantage and get a real edge on this week's action. Last week was me, Ray. This week I think it's Jason, and we're going to start the rotation over against you back on there. But Ray, how you doing, man?
Good, man. Another Black Monday in Steelers land. But I don't know. I think some fans might have a little pep in their step here after the debut of one Kenny Pickett on Sunday afternoon.
It's crazy because it was I talked to my friends and family after that game who are all Steelers fans, and they're like, I don't feel so bad this week. I'm just the Steelers are 1-3 again. They were there last year. They were there 2019. I think they were there 2018 as well. And it's just man, it's not a great position, but I think everyone's in the same boat. It's like Kenny Pickett, gave you some hope there because as Jerry pointed out during the game on his Twitter account, they did have the longest drive of the season with a 12-play, 82-yard touchdown drive that ended with Kenny Pickett trucking his way into the end zone. But Ray, you gave out your grades for all the positions around, and overall, you gave the quarterback position a D grade. What was your take on how Kenny handled his situation? He did throw 3 interceptions in this game.
Yeah,
where the Hail Mary excluded. It's the Hail Mary.
Right.
What was your grade on his decision-making and how he performed?
Yeah, I thought the only bad interception was the one that allowed the Jets to march down the field and win the game. Kenny talked about it after the game, Chris.
Yeah.
You cannot make that throw. I mean,
Right.
He was sort of throwing off his back foot under pressure there. I think maybe he's trying to throw that away. Freiermuth, has the ball in his hands. He's hit. A lot of people want to blame Freiermuth because he had his hands on the ball.
Yeah.
I blame Pickett because Pickett never should have put him in that situation. So
he even said, I was trying to throw it higher. And he's like, I should have thrown it so he couldn't get to it. But he was trying to throw it away. But still, you're right. You can't make that throw in that situation.
No, just a bad mental error on his part in a critical stage of the game. So that's why I gave the quarterbacks a D in that situation. You're right about the Hail Mary. Forget about that. The one to Claypool, I didn't think it was a good pass, but I didn't think Chase really helped him out either. I thought maybe Chase could have broken that up. So I think overall, there was a spark there. Mike Tomlin said afterward he was looking for a spark. I think he got that. You saw him run into the end zone twice. He wasn't afraid to duck his head and get into the end zone on 2 occasions there. So I think going forward, Mike Tomlin has not made the call yet, at least that we know of. It's not public that he's the starter going forward. Chris, I was in the locker room after the game. Deontay Johnson came out and said, we got to roll with Kenny. It's his show now. I mean, I'm paraphrasing him, but I mean, normally in a locker room, you're like, you let the coach handle it. You're like, we just got to take care of our business. No, it was like, Kenny's the guy, and we're going to roll with him. So I think the players kind of have their minds made up. I think Mike Tomlin tomorrow at his news conference will probably make it official, but I do think it is noteworthy that he did not name Kenny the starter right after the game. I think maybe he wanted to sit on it for a while, but like I said, those players in that locker room, for them, it's Kenny time. Was
it the right call? Because you could say that, yes, he got 2 touchdowns. One was a drive, and one was Minka Fitzpatrick giving them the ball at the 4. Right. But he also, those 2 interceptions. Mitch Trubisky, if there was one thing that he did right, it was that he avoided crazy turnovers. And right. One turnover was bounced off of Deontay Johnson's hands. That one wasn't like that. There's still some conflict I think among Steeler fans that maybe there was a problem. It doesn't appear that there's a conflict in the locker room, and that's I didn't hear a sense of oh man, Mitch got dogged. It was like we had some pep in our step, in there in the second half. Yeah. And would Tomlin be crazy to even try to bring Mitch Trubisky back as a starter next week at this point?
No, I mean, I wouldn't say he's crazy. Here's the thing, Chris. Mitch Trubisky, once again, did not play bad.
I thought this was his best, this least incompetent outing of all of his games.
Yeah, which is damning with faint praise, but that's what it is.
Yes.
So here's the situation. Here's how I read the situation. The players in that locker room do not respond well to Mitch. They respond well to Kenny. But the statistics, his decision-making on the field, that's a whole other area. And you could argue, like you just did, that Mitch Trubisky does take better care of the football than Kenny Pickett does in a very short sample size. I don't think you're wrong in saying that. To me, Mike Tomlin wanted a spark. It was a feel thing. I think it's going to be a feel thing going forward. But I also think it's one of those situations, how do you put the toothpaste back into the tube at this point? Kenny Pickett is your future. We saw how Mitch was kind of ticked off after the game. Do you really want to go back to him and then bench him again when you know Kenny's going to be the guy in 3 games, 4 games, 8 games down the road? I mean, I don't know how you do that, Chris. So to me, I would be surprised if Mike Tomlin does not name him the starting quarterback in Buffalo, and we'll see how Kenny does. But, it's a really interesting dynamic about how it all, unfolded, not only yesterday, but over the last 4 weeks. Mitch didn't make a lot of mistakes, also didn't lead a lot of touchdown drives. People were upset. I mean, in some ways, you could sort of look at it as Tomlin gave the fans what they wanted. And, we'll see how it goes from here. But, I thought for the situation on Sunday, he wanted a spark. He got one. Now let's see what he does going forward.
Is he mismanaging the situation? There's a lot of people that said he should have been starting immediately or at least earlier. I get trying to give some credence to your vets, just not bring, because here's the thing. If I'm a veteran and I see that there's ever a rookie in behind me in the Steelers and they abandoned me after one bad moment, then I'm like, man, maybe I wouldn't go there. So there's an idea behind it. But at the same time, if Kenny Pickett has a command of the offense, and I will say this, yes, the stats didn't look great, but every time he took the field, every time he came out of the huddle, he had a plan. He knew where he was going. Mitch Trubisky didn't have that. He looked gun shy at a lot of times. And in this game, I thought he was better. But in general, he hasn't had that sense of hey, I'm going here. This is what they're calling. I'm going to make this adjustment, and it kind of gives some credence there. But is Mike Tomlin handling this the right way in your opinion?
Well, here's the thing. When you have a quarterback situation like this, where a guy like Ben Roethlisberger retires and you're going to bring in a rookie and you're going to have a veteran come in, it's going to get icky. I mean, it's going to be crappy for both sides. I mean, I wrote about it last week. Andrew Brandt went through this when he was with the Packers, right? I mean, they were playing Brett Favre, and Brett Favre didn't like coming to work every day knowing that Aaron Rodgers was there to replace him. And then on the other side of the equation was Aaron Rodgers is sitting for 3 years, and he wants to know, when is it ever going to be my time? So, eventually that situation worked out. But as you look at it with the Steelers, and honestly, Chris, I don't know that this situation would have been different if Mitch Trubisky hadn't been brought in, right? Like, let's say the Steelers needed a plan, right? They wanted to draft a quarterback this year, but they really didn't know if they were going to get their guy. So whether it was Mason Rudolph or Mitch Trubisky, it doesn't really matter. Let's just say it was just Mason.
Mm-hmm.
Now Mason probably would be named the team captain. He'd probably be the starter for the first 4 games of the season. And really, you're in the same kind of awkward situation where you got a team captain who's being benched, and now you got the future of the franchise replacing him. So from that perspective, I don't know how the Steelers could have managed it any differently. You don't know that you're going to get Kenny Pickett,
Right.
number 20 overall. You could hope, but you don't know that's going to happen. So I just think this is something that all teams go through. Now, listen, the one place where you can maybe criticize Mike Tomlin a little bit is you had 10 days after the Thursday night game to make a move. You made it after one half against the New York Jets. Maybe if you felt that strongly about Kenny Pickett, give him the reps in practice, make the move after 3 weeks, and don't do what you did against the Jets game where you could even argue you put Kenny Pickett in a bad situation, right?
Yeah.
No reps with the starters during the week. You kind of throw him in there, and he's running the no huddle as much as he's huddling up. I mean, that was a tough situation for Kenny. So if I'm going to criticize Mike Tomlin for one thing, it might be that, but I'm not going to criticize them for bringing in Mr. Trubisky as a backup plan. I mean, listen, Chris, they had no idea they were going to be able to get Kenny Pickett at number 20 overall. So turns out they were lucky they got their guy, but this is just one of those things you have to go through as a franchise, I think, when you have kind of like a murky quarterback situation as they have now.
Certainly. We'll see how they navigate it. Mike Tomlin will speak Tuesday. We'll probably get a better sense of what's going to happen then. You guys will get to see practice all week long to see how Kenny Pickett does look in practice. Of course, you can't say what happens in practice, but we'll see what we'll be able to see with that, and then we'll get to see how they plan to approach this game against the Buffalo Bills, who look pretty good. Even while they're banged up. But we got a lot of to still talk about. The defense did not have a good finish. I thought they started the game okay, and then they had another fourth quarter fold. We got to talk about what's going wrong there. Lots of comments about that. We'll do that in just a minute here. But first, we got to talk to you about our friends at Liquid Death. Now, Liquid Death, if you've been watching the show or listening to the show, they are the new mountain water brand that comes in a can. And it's a tall boy can that looks just like a beer. Sometimes you'll be seeing someone crushing one of these, and you're thinking, oh, man, they're doing a beer. Nope, they're just staying hydrated. It's just mountain spring water, fresh in the can. And why is it called Liquid Death? It's here to murder your thirst and murder plastic pollution on the planet right now. They also donate 10% of their profits from every can sold to help kill plastic pollution around the world. Plus, they just flat out taste great. And I'm gonna actually give you guys a sense of this. It literally, you crack it open just like a beer. It sips just clean like water. It's fresh every time. You put it in the fridge. It's ice cold. It is an awesome water brand. And again, you're helping yourself out, drinking healthy water. You're also helping out the planet out. That's what Liquid Death is here to do. Go get some Liquid Death right now at your local Target, 7-Eleven, or County Fair, or find a Liquid Death retailer near you with their store located at liquiddeath.com/shore. That's liquiddeath.com/shore. Back here on the North Shore Drive podcast of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, I'm Chris Carter. He's Ray Fittipaldo. Ray, we got to talk about this defense. Now, early on in the first half, I thought they were doing their jobs. They created a turnover at the end of the half. They got Zach Wilson down, with Alex Highsmith. There was cohesion there. The run game wasn't breaking open for the Jets. Like there were some good things there. And then the fourth quarter happened, and they give up 2 touchdown drives in just ways that you can't. And what was crazy was after Kenny Pickett's last touchdown, they had a 20-10 lead, and they play Renegade. The crowd, this was the most lively version of the crowd I think we've seen in Pittsburgh this year. And then they proceed to just give up third down, fourth down, and let Zach Wilson walk down the field. And credit Zach Wilson. I thought he played actually pretty well. Like the Steelers threw blitzes at him. He was able to manage it, make reads. He converted in big situations. But this was a game against an offensive line they were supposed to destroy with all the backups they had. They even lost their backup right tackle, Max Mitchell, who they had to bring in another third-string offensive tackle with Connor McDermott on the other side. They needed to – this was a week that they needed to show, hey, we don't need T.J. Watt to get after the quarterback, and it looks like they really do.
Yeah. It's a bad situation, Chris. I mean, you broke it down. I mean, they're playing against really fourth and fifth string tackles. I mean, right? I mean, you look at what's happened to the Jets, and they're moving people around. They're playing guys they had no plans on playing. And Alex Highsmith did have a sack. I thought he let two others get away, which could have been one was could have been like a 15, 17-yard loss where Zach Wilson was running around. He doesn't get him on the ground. Both times he throws the ball away. And where's Malik Reed? I have no idea. Where's Jameer Jones? They brought up Ryan Anderson yesterday. None of these guys are capable of beating fourth-string offensive tackles and giving the Steelers some semblance of a pass rush against really what I think is still going to be one of the worst teams in the National Football League. One sack when you're going up against the patchwork offensive line. I mean, we're going to sit here. We're going to talk about the secondary. We're going to talk about the gaping holes in the middle of the field. I get it. But if you cannot pressure the quarterback, especially against that offensive line, you don't deserve to win the football game. That's what happened.
I agree. And you just saw when they needed to get a push. And there were times they even sent the extra man, and they just weren't beating their guy. They weren't getting off their blocks, and that is a big problem. And it was also Cam Hayward, Larry Ogunjobi, guys. Ogunjobi was brought here to win those type of situations. And I did see, hey, the Jets were sliding extra protection. They were calling max protect a lot more, and a lot of times they were sliding to go stop Alex Highsmith. So Highsmith, and for him getting off his blocks to get pressure on Zach Wilson, that's fine. I do agree he needs to finish more. But again, you needed somebody else to step up. This was an opportunity for Malik Reed to be like, hey, I can be at least serviceable in that situation. But even on the Philly special reverse pass touchdown to Zach Wilson,
contain.
No, exactly. When you're the edge guy and the play's going the other way, you have to be as deep as the deepest man, and he wasn't. He cuts down the line, and then when the reverse comes, he's not there to put pressure in that guy's face, and maybe that receiver stops, pulls up, and just floats it to the end zone because Zach Wilson was wide open. But at least if Malik Reed was in position, it would have forced him to be out of his element to make that play. They need people to step up there. Cam Hayward talked a lot about cohesion and what they need to do to come together more, especially up front. That's where I think that they could use a lot more. But also your point about the secondary, Minkah Fitzpatrick was visibly frustrated, and I mean everyone was upset about the loss. But he was like, saying we're a more talented team than they are. This was a really bad loss, and he was talking about how they need to be sharper. There were times I think that they were just they were letting guys get open. They weren't communicating in the way they had to start the season. And part of it might be Terrell Edmonds went down. Ahkello Witherspoon was already down. Was missing. Maybe it's the pieces part of it, but still they got to talk better. And they were letting guys get open in the middle part of the field for easier completions for Zach Wilson.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Arthur Millette is playing more because Witherspoon's out. He's basically a run nickel, right? I mean, that's his forte. He's not a cover guy. I thought he was exposed. And here we talk about complementary football every week, right? Well, if you don't have a pass rush, can you really ask your secondary to play man-to-man? Probably not. You're probably better off playing in zone, making Zach Wilson read. Well, the problem with that is when there's no pass rush and you play zone, he could pick you apart in the middle of the field. I mean, I didn't think – I disagree with you. I thought Zach Wilson, if he had faced a competent pass rush yesterday, he would have completed fewer than 50% of his passes. He was able to sit back, read the field, have breakfast, lunch, and dinner food. And, I mean, he's just picking the Steelers apart. I mean, guys are running wide open over the middle of the field. So I thought they made him look better than he actually was. I know he's a number 2 overall pick, but I thought he was erratic when he did face a little bit of pressure, didn't make a lot of good reads. And, the second half, they just didn't get to him. I thought that was the difference in the game, Chris. I mean, give him credit for leading those 2 drives, but he had so much time to sit back there. I mean,
I do agree.
that Steelers defense, man, you got to step up and do better in those situations.
I agree. And again, I was looking at the numbers going into that game, and he had a 29.3 completion percentage when blitzed, but the Steelers were trying to bring the blitz at times. They didn't bring it. I thought they could have brought it a little bit more to give opportunities for mismatches up front, but
Yeah.
even when they did, they weren't. You got to beat the man in front of you. And
they picked it up. I mean, give that Jets offensive line credit. They picked up those blitzes too.
Yeah, and that allowed Zach Wilson to kind of do what he did, run around. And again, Zach Wilson wasn't great in this game. I'm not a big Zach Wilson guy at all. I and that's why I was like, man, this needs to be a game that you win because he's not that good. And you're right, 18 of 36, literally 50% for 252 yards. I mean, he had a lower passer rating than Kenny Pickett did with three interceptions and no touchdown passes.
I mean, Chris, those final two drives.
Yeah,
he was completing. I mean, just take the final drive. I don't have the numbers in front of me. He was probably completing 40% of his passes going into the final drive, just to give you an idea of how he played. I mean, again, give him credit for leading those final two drives, but I was not impressed with what I saw in the first three quarters.
We will see if the defense can rebound, because if this team is going to go anywhere forward, even if Kenny Pickett comes in and looks awesome, this team isn't going anywhere if that defense doesn't fix things up. And part of it may be, hey, injuries, all that, but they still have to find answers. We'll see if they can. We'll keep watching things. Ray will be reporting on how they're practicing moving forward. But we got to talk about the AFC North, because it was a wild weekend in the NFL yet again. We saw some upsets. We saw some teams standing up. And now you have an AFC North situation where the Steelers find themselves in the bottom, but not too far away. We'll talk about that and a lot more here on the North Shore Drive podcast. But first, we got to talk to you guys about Yinzers in the Berg. Yinzers, listen up. With the Steelers campaign off and running, you want to show your support for your black and gold, and it's easy. You go to Yinzers in the Berg. They have two legendary shops in the Strip District. Plus, they have a growing online store for all you out-of-towners. And Yinzers in the Berg is the place to go for all your Pittsburgh sports apparel, accessories, and much, much more. If you're a big Kenny Pickett fan, they're going to have a lot of Kenny Pickett merchandise. So get to Yinzers in the Berg right now. They'll see you in the Strip District, or check out their shop online at yinzerspgh.com. That's yinzerspgh.com for all your Pittsburgh sports apparel. Back here on the North Shore Drive podcast, I'm Chris Carter. He's Ray Fittipaldo. Ray, the AFC North has been so up and down this year, where the Bengals started 0-2, but now they're 2-2. The Ravens looked like they might run away with the division. Now they're 2-2. The Browns, after they beat the Steelers last week, they were 2-1. It was looking like, hey, you got the Falcons coming up. Then they lose to the Falcons. So now you have a division where everybody is kind of just stacked up on top of each other, and you're wondering, like, hey, where's this division going to go? The Steelers, we've talked about it for weeks. They needed to be in a better position so that they could handle this next stretch of game against the Bills, Buccaneers, Dolphins, and Eagles. I actually thought the Buccaneers did not look good against the Chiefs, on Sunday Night Football. But still, those are all four of those teams are talented groups that you're going to have serious challenges with. Is this a division that the Steelers could still creep into with the way these other teams are playing? It's not necessarily about the Steelers right now, but are some of these teams going to break away and start to get on some serious runs that are going to put it out of reach for the Steelers?
Yeah, I mean, listen, Chris, I think you could see a team that goes 10-7 win this division, maybe even 9-8. I mean, I think there are a couple of good teams, but I think in this AFC, you're not going to be able to, run roughshod over the competition and win 13, 14 games. What I think is, I don't think the Steelers are going to be good enough to even be in contention. I mean, we'd be singing a different song here if they beat the Jets. They were 2-2. I mean, it would be a completely different conversation, right? Mm-hmm. Especially with Kenny Pickett going forward. But now you got the Murderers Row coming up. You got 3 of the next 4 on the road, right? The home game is against the Buccaneers. I mean, you're talking about 4 of the best teams in the NFL. At least I think 4 of the top 10 teams in the NFL. So even if they're 2-6, let's say they find a way to rise up and win one of these next 4. You're 2-6. Where are you going if you're 2-6? I mean, they'd be lucky, as they did in 2013, to finish 8-8 if that happened. So I think this team right now is in dire straits. I don't think anyone in the AFC North is going to run away with it. I just don't think the Steelers are good enough to be in contention.
And that's the crazy part, is the shame of it, is that, like, if the Steelers, like, if they were 3-1 right now, you could afford to go 1-3 in this next stretch here.
Right.
And then all of a sudden you're 4-4 at the bye. You might get TJ Watt back, and you'll see how you play there. Maybe you get DeMonte KZ, maybe everyone's healthy, and then Kenny Pickett has like a kind of a fresh start to saying, hey, even keel, let's just push forward. But you're in a position where you got to steal 2 games in this next stretch to just stay afloat in the AFC North. I'm looking at these schedules here. The Bengals over the next few weeks, they've got the Ravens in Baltimore, so that'll be a watch. That'll cancel each other out. Then they've got the AFC South, and they're on the road at the Saints. They're facing the Falcons at home. Then they have the Browns in Cleveland, and then the Panthers at home. The Bengals, they started out 0-2. They handled their business beating the Jets. Then, with the Dolphins, Tua Tagovailoa did go out in that game, and that's when you saw them kind of take over that situation. But this is kind of a chance for the Bengals to reset after their rough start, losing to the Steelers and losing to the Cowboys, both with Mitch Trubisky and Cooper Rush at quarterbacks. I'm still not sold on them taking this over, though. Like, I think a lot of people are just assuming, hey, they're gonna win. They're gonna win a lot more of their games. The Ravens, they've got the Bengals. I think the Ravens are the team that you could see start running away, because they got the Bengals, the Giants, then the Browns, and then they play the Buccaneers and the Saints. But all in all, still, like, if the Steelers can stay within a distance, they could at least put themselves and say, hey, they could be fighting for the wild card in the last 4 weeks of the season. And if they're doing that, I think that's a more realistic opportunity. I just don't know if everybody in the AFC North is going to stay in this 500 range that they're in right now.
Yeah, I mean, listen, let's say they go 2-2 over the stretch, right? Miami might be, they still might be without Tua. Who knows? Going down there might be a different story. So let's even say you're 3-5 at the bye. The schedule does lighten considerably after that. So there's a way that you can maybe kind of like stay in contention for a wild card spot. But boy, and I know we went through this in 2019.
Yeah.
They've had some bad starts over the last couple of years with Mike Tomlin, and they always seem to rebound. But Chris, this seems like a different situation, doesn't it? I mean,
it does. It does.
It doesn't feel like, even in 2019, like there was gloom and doom with Ben out, but the defense was playing awesome.
And they went and got Minka Fitzpatrick. Like when they added him, you were like, oh, this is different now.
Yeah, and they were playing well. Even early, that first game in San Francisco, he was a difference maker. And like James Conner fumbled late in that game. That's the only reason they lost that game. Now the defense isn't playing well. Now you got this quarterback situation. You're probably going to be playing with the rookie for the rest of the year. You got an offensive line that's on its best day decent.
Yeah.
You got some receivers who are talented, but they don't always catch the ball, and they don't always run the right patterns. And sometimes you just scratch your head and say, what are they doing on any given play? So, like, there's a lot that's working against the Steelers now that I really didn't have a feel. Like, 2019 was just a different feeling for me.
Yeah.
They had some juice. This team's kind of stale right now, being 1-3. Like, I don't get a good feeling at all about this football team.
You're right. I think there is a staleness right now that they have to find a way to shake off. This is an offense that doesn't have an identity. And granted, they didn't have an identity in 2019 either when Ben went out. They had to kind of figure things out. But that defense with TJ Watt, Bud Dupree, Cam Hayward, Stephon Tuitt, when Minka Fitzpatrick joined, you still had Joe Hayden kind of leading the cornerback room. Even Devin Bush, a rookie Devin Bush, was playing solid. It gave them, and I think you had Vince Williams to kind of calm that situation down. I will say I think Myles Jack hasn't been bad, but I got to ask you, Ray, and I know that we talked about the defense earlier, but why are they putting Robert Spillane out there on so many passing downs when he is just exposed in space so much?
Yeah, I mean, they don't put him out there to cover a lot in man-to-man situations, but his forte was supposed to be getting the defense lined up, right? He's a good communicator. He's actually halfway decent in zone. But now, I mean, you put anybody back there on a zone defense and you give them 4 to 5 seconds to throw the football, it's not going to turn out well. I don't think Robert Spillane has played well, but you ask Terrell Austin about it, he's going to tell you he's smart. He's a good communicator. He knows how to get the defense lined up. That's important, but you also have to be able to play too. And, I'll say this about Miles Jack. I think he's been good in the run game. I don't think Bush has been bad. But still, in passing situations, 3rd and longs, 4th and 7 yesterday, they're just not getting off the field, and they're getting picked apart in the middle of the field. So whether that's the safeties, that's the inside linebackers, whoever it is, they're not nearly good enough right now in those situations. They got to get a lot better.
They do got to get a lot better. We'll see if anything happens, if there's a shakeup, if there's some challenges for the Steelers coming up. They've got a tough task in going on the road to play the Bills in this situation. We'll see how they prepare and how they start to handle the situation. But we have a long week ahead. Mike Tomlin again speaks Tuesday. He's gonna go down. We're probably gonna hear officially what's gonna be the situation there. You can catch all of that news, all of the updates on Post-Gazette.com, where Ray, Jerry, Brian will be on the case. They'll be reporting on what's going on with the Steelers offense, with their situation there. I do wonder, man, how they're gonna handle that and how both sides of the ball kind of feed off of that energy, because it's not going to be an easy situation to remedy, but we'll see how they play the Bills this week. We got 2 more shows on the North Shore Drive podcast with Jason Mackey on Wednesday and Brian Batko on Friday, and a lot of other things. Ray, what else you got coming up this week that you're excited to get going?
Well, assuming Kenny Pickett is named the starter, I'm going to have a story in Sunday's paper looking back at all of the debuts, the first starts of some notable quarterbacks in Steelers franchise history, and also some of the best and worst debuts of other NFL quarterbacks over the years. So we'll see what happens Tuesday, but working on that right now.
We certainly will see that. Do check out Ray Fittipaldo and all of his work in the Post-Gazette, along with all of our other Steelers writers in Jerry Dulac, Brian Batko, and our team. Thanks again for checking out the North Shore Drive podcast. We'll be keeping you up to date with how the Steelers plan to attack the 3-1 Bills. They put off the upset last year. Seems like it'd be a tall task, even taller task to do it this year. But all that and more this week on the North Shore Drive podcast. I'm Chris Carter. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Carter Critiques. Read my work on Pitt Athletics in the Post-Gazette as well. Back Wednesday with more on your Pittsburgh Steelers and all things Pittsburgh sports right here on the North Shore Drive podcast.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the North Shore Drive podcast of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. If you're watching this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. For 6 months of digital access to post-gazette.com for just $6, click the link down below in the description.